Hey everyone, it's me, Brandon again. Reason why I'm reaching out is I just finished up my first weekend doing private firearms lessons for people, and I had my first two students, and I spent about 2 hours with each of them, and we had a lovely time. I thought, for the sake of interest, I would kind of discuss what I went over with each of the two students in relative brevity, kind of talk over what particular training and what sort of focusing we did on each of these particular students. Now, student A, we're just going to go ahead and we'll call him Jacob. Jacob's a strong name. Anyways, Jacob, someone that I know very well, recently went out and purchased a SIG 320. Now, the SIG 320 is the least controversial firearm that has been released in modern history. Absolutely no one has anything controversial to say about it at all, especially not if they've served in the Army or if they've ever been a police officer that has been issued a SIG 320. Good. Now we've gotten that out of the way. I have a bit of a personal anecdote concerning the SIG 320, and for many of you that may not know this about me, let me share you one of my biggest disappointments that I have personally ever done for the military. So, many years ago, I was in the National Guard looking for some orders, and I got pulled into the FIRO office. My job was part of the fiscal inventory group, and we were making sure that anybody that needed new net fieldings, meaning if you were requisitioning new equipment from Big Army, from the National Guard, my job was to take your Santa wish list and turn it into real documents that the military could understand, and then we would be the liaisons to get you that equipment. Once the equipment was in, our job was to get that equipment to your unit, to bring in the trainers to you, have them teach your trainers how the weapon works so that they can train it. We call that the train the trainer, right? And for many of those rollouts, I was there to see the weapons roll out and to see the Joes train with one older iteration of equipment and moving on to the new iteration of equipment. I was there during the rollout of the M17. If you're in the Texas Army National Guard today and you're rolling around with the M17 pistol, it was likely me and my group that requisitioned it for you. And I'm sorry, your mileage may vary. The M17 is a wonderful pistol, especially if you're used to firing on full-size striker-fired guns, and especially if you're used to shooting something with maybe not the best trigger, like a Glock. I'm a 1911 fanboy. Everything from the grip angle to the trigger system, all of those things, to me, I love. I feel like it's in my heritage as an American. I feel like it's in my heritage as a Pacific Islander to like the 1911. I feel like as a local Texan resident living here in Austin, Texas, walking distance from Georgetown, it doesn't make sense for me to not own a Staccato. I love the 1911, and if you like the 1911, then you probably don't like striker-fired guns. And I'm going to say, as a 1911 hammer-fired gun guy, the 320 had a really good trigger. I did not dislike it, which is hard for me to admit, even stock. Which, at 25 yards, if I'm trying to hit a target with a 320, I can hit the target. That makes me happy. That's perfect for a duty pistol. Especially since that's mostly going to be a weapon that you're transitioning to in a real military environment for personal carry. It's a great weapon. Now, the 320 has a lot of 1911 style things going on to it, from the grip angle to, the nice little beaver tail. There's so much of it that really it kind of lends itself naturally to my point of aim. I feel like I got to my point of aim quicker than I did with a full-size Glock or other relative striker-fired gun. Now, I haven't compared a tricked-out SIG to a really nice Shadow Systems. I haven't compared a full-size SIG to a really good FN striker fire, like an FN9 or something like that. I'm sure there's other guns out there that give it a run for its money, but for me and what I've considered usable for a duty frame pistol, I think the M17 is really, really good. Now, would I prefer the M17 over a Beretta? No. No, I love the Beretta. I think a Beretta, especially the newer models that you can put an optic on it, especially if you're looking like at a Gucci or Beretta, like a Langdon Tactical Beretta. I think those are fantastic weapon systems, and I think that when a Beretta is well maintained, it can outperform and outshine the 320, especially if you are doing apples to apples comparisons with appropriate makes and models. But the 320 is a polymer gun. It's more modular. You can replace more of the things on it. And when you're talking about fielding equipment for a very, very large army, right, modularity is sometimes difficult to provide. For the longest of times, most service rifles were wooden, and the only way you can really adjust your grip was changing your elevation of your chicken wing to get, a better handle on the weapon. Nowadays, you can collapsible butt stocks and folding stocks, and you can change the grip on the Picatinny rail more forward or back depending on where you need your foregrip, and all of these different things in the rifle world. All that modularity, oftentimes it's hard to get that down into a small pistol caliber weapon, and the M17 I think is a good first step towards that, especially when you're considering that the Army is trying to bring more of its manufacturing stateside. It makes a lot of sense to go with SIG here, stateside in America. Well, to each their own. Every person has their own preference with firearms, etc., etc., etc. But when my friend came in, when Jacob came in with his SIG, one of the first things I noticed was his red dot optic was just out of alignment, right? So typically with dots, let me see if I can get this in a way where you can, okay, dot is on. See that dot? Now if you do it right, you want the dot, if you line up your front sight and your rear sight, oh, this is a struggle. Oh, it's like the mirror world. Do you see how, like, in a perfect world, that dot's kind of floating directly above the front sight? Oh man, this is tricky. I don't want to like stare down my barrel like a psycho. So that's what it should kind of look like. The dot's over this sight, and this sight is perfectly in between these two rear sights. It's co-witnessed, right? So on his SIG 320, because it's a nice gun, you can co-witness the front sight, or the sights and the optic. So instead of his red dot just sitting directly above the front sight, it was like way up and to the left on the window. So step one was fixing the red dot. So we put a bore laser in there, which is essentially, it's a special type of bullet or a device that's been modified so it fits the shape and size of a 9mm handgun. I have one in front of me. Let me see if I can get it working for you. So you can get these really, really cheap, and you don't really need to buy an expensive one. But essentially what this is you can take this bad boy, and it's a little laser McDoodle, right? And then you can take something like this, and you can load it straight down the barrel of your 9mm, right? And then you have a little laser that's coming out. Oh, check that out, right? So now, see the laser behind me? All we have to do is get the green dot and the red dot to kiss, right? And essentially, when those two things kiss at whatever distance you're trying to zero your weapon, that's where you can get a rough idea of where the bullet's going. If it's firing in a straight line, which it's not, right? It arcs because it's a trajectory. It's got weight, and there's gravity, and there's propulsion and lift and drag and all sorts of nerdy ballistic shit going on in here. And if you don't take the time to learn the nerdy ballistic shit, well, you're just going to be popping rounds off into the wind and praying, which is not a good plan. Anyways, I digress. So, put the little laser McDoodle in there, get the optic to line up. After we started putting the bore snake in there, we realized that his optic light died. And then once we realized his optic light died, we just had to replace the battery. So most dots take these sort of like special little silver button batteries. The SIG actually takes the smaller little button batteries. I had both. So we were able to get his dot up and rolling, replace the battery, put the screws on there, put some silver line marks on the... let me show you that, because that's actually a good lesson. There's some things here. Since we're on the topic of dots, right? Here's some stuff that no one's going to teach you but your daddy, right? So check it out. See those white lines that I have right there on my optic, right? See how they go over my screws, right? Once you get your optic screwed in and dialed down and it's exactly where you need it to, a lot of times we recommend putting some like Loctite, a little bit of blue, like super adhesive, kind of made for guns. The blue stuff's pretty strong. You put it in there, it makes sure that the screws don't move, so you don't have to move it again or take it off, right? You can if you put like a solvent on there, but we're not trying to do that. If I need to swap the batteries off, I can put it in from the side, so I never need to take this off. And if there's ever a situation where the screws move, they get wiggled, this thing gets banged around or dropped, I can tell when there's been changes or modifications to the tolerance now. So I'll know visually just from looking at my gun, the optic should still be zeroed, unless someone like literally went in and moved some of the smaller screws, right? Which we want to leave that in case we are trying to change our distances for shooting. Another thing that's helpful is, mine's kind of wearing down, I'm going to make it a little bit better, but for especially square optics, I found whenever you're trying to find your dot when you're shooting for speed, I like to put a nice thick silver and white or white racing stripe down the fucking middle, sorry for cussing, down the middle of my optic here. And there's a reason for this. So when you're drawing for speed, whether it's competition or, you know, a quick draw, or you're just trying to practice, oftentimes one of the more difficult games that we play is trying to find the red dot as we're bringing it up, especially if you're trying to co-witness. And sometimes that nice thick little silver line, if I can just put that directly where it needs to go over the, you know, as the gun's coming out, the silver line's already almost kind of pointing where the dot's going to be. So as I bring it up, if I just see that silver line and get that lined up to my natural point of aim, it's already right there. It helps me with my indexing. Plus, if there's anything car sales has taught me, is that if you put a racing stripe on anything, it does go faster. Guns included. I don't have magazine. Come on out, little laser. Okay, so bore laser, useful, especially for certain distances, especially for certain guns. If you're trying to zero an AR-15 at 300 meters, right? I don't know what sort of laser designator sight like this is ever going to be strong enough to help you get that. I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just trying to say, like, for certain distances, your mileage may vary, right? And the little trick is, if you're doing it with a red dot or an optic, if you turn down the optic intensity so that you can see the bore laser through the optic, it'll help you with that situation. So yeah, we helped get Jacob's red dot basically zeroed. That took a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, a little tinkering, but we got it. Then we went down to the range, and right away his aim had improved dramatically just by getting his equipment to run and operate correctly. Then we started working on speed transitioning drills, shooting different spots on different targets in different sequential order. We worked on getting his comfort and familiarity with the handgun to a certain point, so he knew what he could hit at certain targets. He knew what he could hit reliably at certain distances, rather, and he knew where he would start having more targets hitting off the paper at certain distances too. So we got his maximum effective range at 25 yards. We got him to the point where he was shooting, I'd say, a grouping that he could put both hands up like this on 25 yards on a torso-sized target. And for what he was trying to accomplish, especially for his first real range day with that gun, I felt like we got a ton of good weapons familiarity and training out of that. Now, the only thing that I think we need to do to help improve his skill set further, and you know, you can always improve, we need to work on shooting and moving, transitioning from shooting from cover, shooting from different positions, not just from the offhand, you know, standing position. We need to work on building familiarity and building your confidence with your ammo as well. One of the interesting things was when Jacob showed up and we were getting ready to go shoot, the ammo that I noticed he had loaded in his pistols for his 9mm were 124 grain hollow points. And I was like, whoa, you're using the good stuff at the range, you know? Like, if you need 124 grain plinking ammo, I got 124 grain plinking ammo, but you shouldn't use the hollow points. And he said, well, I mean, doesn't the round nose bullets kill people too? Like, if I load this in my gun and shoot at somebody, will they die? And like, yeah, no, handguns are lethal, and the round nose ones will do damage, but it's just understanding the difference between the hydrostatic shock is, or the hyperstatic shock that's coming out of those bullets. That's the lethality, right? There's two ways that the bullet can get you. One is it goes through something important, right? And it causes a timer bleed where you slowly bleed out and die, or it flicks a switch. There's something inside of you that's so vital and so important that your body needs it to continue, and it hits that thing and it no longer works and you are turned off like a light switch. Round nose bullets are better at putting the timer on you, and flat nose bullets, or not flat, the hypersonic hollow points typically are better at popping things like a balloon, like a water balloon getting slapped with a really fast moving frying pan versus getting poked with a really, really tiny needle. They're both going to get water everywhere, but one's trying to pop the balloon, the other's trying to make it leak, right? So, hollow point ammo, I wouldn't use that for training unless you are just rich, just in a different tax bracket than me. And I wouldn't recommend using your plinking ammo for self-defense unless it's all you got, right? So, I think, to reiterate that point, it might be a useful practice for him if we went to an outdoor range and started maybe popping some fruit with some hollow points versus shooting some fruit with some regular jacketed ammunition, just so he gets an understanding of what his handgun is actually doing when you're looking at the destructive capability of that weapon, right? So, in my mind, there's three tenets that we really need to build confidence, right? There's your trust with your skills. I am proficient enough where I think if you put any 9mm handgun that's not like the worst, like doesn't have sights, you know, like missing parts, if you put a 9mm handgun in front of me and you put a target at 15 yards, even if it's a black powder pistol, I'm relatively confident that I can hit the target just because I've touched so many different guns. I know my skill set. I know my fundamentals are so good that I can operate a series of weapon platforms, even an AT4, and I can do the thing. Yeah, because I'm that guy. I've been training to hold all the guns. I want to be that guy. I learn about different firearms, guns that they don't make anymore. I want to learn how to take them apart because it's interesting to me. I need it. Does that make sense? So I know that my skills are at a certain level, right? But everyone's got their own bias, right? If you put somebody that absolutely dogs on a certain brand, right, and they hate the brand so much, right? If you put a high point yeet cannon in my hands, I've never fired a high point. All my stereotypes that I know about high point are that they make cheap, bad, ineffective guns that jam a lot, and they're typically used for violent crimes and the poors. Okay? Well, if I was buying a handgun or keeping a handgun on me to trust my life on, if I was buying a gun for my wife to go take with her on her concealed carry, and I thought there was a snowball's chance in hell she'd ever have to use the gun to defend herself, I'm never going to put a gun in her hand that I don't have confidence in. The confidence in my skills are there, where if I'm in a firefight and all I have is a high point yeet cannon, I know that I can clear jams. I know how to feed double feeds. I know how to do tactical reloads and conserve ammunition if I'm really in a pinch. And if I really needed to use the gun, I'm sure I could make it work. But would I put that same, maybe the best way to put it is my confidence in somebody else's skill is not to the point where I would trust an inferior product for their self-defense, especially someone I cared about. right? Now, if that's all you got, that's all you got, and you shouldn't be ashamed of your high point. You should sing from the rooftops that you are this good with what you got, and if anyone put a better weapon in your hand, you would be God's gift to the earth. And that's the attitude you need to have, because one day, you might become exactly that, So anyways, confidence in you and your skills. We start there. There's always something you can get better at. 2, confidence in your firearm. Do you know every time you pull the trigger, it's going to go bang? If there's problems, do you know how to fix it? Are you confident you know how to fix the problem with that firearm? Do you think the firearm is reliable? Here's a good question. How many years of solid shooting do you think you got left on that firearm staring at it right now? Right? Those are questions that not a lot of people ask themselves, right? And when you have that understanding of your gun and go like, hey, Billy may not be the slickest shot, but if there was ever a gun that could get him to shoot straight, it'd be this. So, Billy, you use that, you use this, I'll go grab that one, and maybe that might get you to the point where you're okay, If there's ever a situation where we need the absolute zero to shoot like an absolute hero, well, now's not the time to be teaching him how to work a 2-stage trigger the day that we have to do the shooting, right? If you are practicing with equipment that takes a little while to get the movements down, well, learning how to get those movements down is a skill set that doesn't just fall from a tree. Like a great example is learning how to shoot with iron sights, right? When you make the little U bucket and you put the front sight, you always have to teach people, first you acquire the target. You put the thing you're trying to shoot in the bucket. Is the target in the bucket? Good, right? Now we need to make sure that the target that we're shooting at, right, we have a positive idea on the dude, right? So look at the guy. Where are you trying to shoot? You trying to shoot his chest? Don't try and shoot the chest, try and shoot the button on his chest. Aim small, miss small, right? These are all the things you're thinking in that while you're aiming, right? You put it on the little button. You put the guy on the U. Now you got to make sure that you've got your elevation down, so you look at that front sight, and you put the front sight directly equidistant from both sides of the U, and you get it lined up. You get the front sight directly lined up on the little button, right? And then you have to focus, right? You have to focus on the front sight, not the rear sight. The rear sight goes blurry. The target goes blurry. The front sight goes and gets perfectly into focus, right? And then once you have that front sight into focus, right on his little button, and he blurs out, then you got to control the trigger pull. Bang. And then you hit the target, right? It might be off by a little bit, but you got the nice little group. Then the follow-up shots. Those are all things to think about in a half, if you're a good trained shooter and you've got fast, young eyes, right? You can do that really fast. Just up, target acquisition, red dot, blur out, fire, right? But with the green dot, it's like both eyes open, green dot on target, bang, right? Working with the Glock, do you feel that wall? Do you feel that 2-stage trigger? Okay, now ride through it, don't jerk it, and then bang. If you get good with the Glock trigger, learning how to overcome that 2-stage trigger is going to make you a great shot. But when you're shooting with something like this, there's no real give. This is all the play that the trigger has. That's it. It's a 2-pound trigger pull. And for new shooters, overcoming the trigger is oftentimes one of the hardest things about shooting for qualification or shooting for accuracy. So if you take a brand new shooter and you give them a well-zeroed optic that's not going to require them to focus on finding the right sight picture, and it's not going to require all sorts of different training or different types of training, rather where you're focusing on co-witnessing versus trying to get that, that perfect iron sight shot. And instead of focusing on overcoming that trigger pull all the time, you start working on different things like staying loose, moving with the shot, stances, dynamic shooting. You can end up a completely different type of shooter whose skill set is more at moving through targets quickly than it is that the person who sits at the range and they pride themselves on how tight the grouping is at 25 yards, right? If you're just trying to get really good at a really nice grouping at 25 yards, there's only so much training I can really do for you, right? I can teach you to show you what you're doing wrong. Like, oh, I can tell you pulled the trigger there. I can tell over there you got breathing problems over there. You kind of anticipated the trigger pull, so you brought this there. Over here, I can kind of tell that you were trying to fight to the recoil before the recoil was even happening, so it's more anticipation. Over here, it looks like you were just putting the shots too quickly, so like you're seeing the bullet raise. You know, there's just different lessons, right, that I can show you, but once you learn those lessons, really I can't really help you dial in your targets all that much. Now, when it's like transitioning from target to target, shooting at your grid squares and trying to see which grid and which firing lane you're actually better at. Like you shoot up to the left and down to the left more accurately than you shoot up to the right and down to the right. I know why. Do you know why? Right? Those are the lessons that we can kind of work on in those particular fields, right? So, Jacob, we had a fantastic little 2-hour spat at the range, went through, looked at all the different firearms. We both ended up leaving the range with a new appreciation for the 320, its capabilities, how it rocks, how it looks. And he walked into there thinking, I bought this thing as an impulse purchase. It's my first handgun, or my first full-size handgun, rather. And he left going, this is a great gun. I'm going to go buy a Gray Guns trigger kit. I'm going to go put a KKM barrel inside of there. I'm going to go get all this aftermarket stuff done because now he's hooked. He's hooked. It's fun. It's like going to the range. You think that a 15, 17, 20 round capacity magazine is plenty until you realize that's like 8 seconds of shooting. That's 8 seconds of shooting, and now you got to reload. Now you need more magazines. Now you need a speed loader to load the magazines, and yada, 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 yada. Right? So, Jacob, thankfully, has got a really good job, and he can afford all these neat little things that he wants to do to his gun, and that's awesome. You know, that's really good. For the newer shooter, right, let's say you're thinking about picking up a firearm, and you're trying to work, like most Americans, within a budget, right? Well, like every sales job and every sales gig, the most important question is, like, compared to what? Right? If somebody comes in and goes, you know, I was really looking at buying a Glock, and I really want a Glock, but I think they're a reliable handgun. It's probably fits what my family is looking for, what it needs, etc., etc. I got a bunch of kids around the house, so I don't really need a huge gun collection. What I really need is a gun with 2 or 3 magazines, and you know, it's reliable, and I don't have to drop hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this thing to keep it going. Well, maybe I can't afford the Glock. I'm going to go out and buy a Taurus or a used High Point, or I'm going to go out and buy any of these other like $300 guns, right? Well, just remember, budget tools get budget problems. If you're getting a $300 gun, you're going to have $300 problems. And what I mean by that is, it might be a 10-round magazine, and 7 of the rounds that you try and run through the gun aren't going to cycle properly. And you're going to find yourself struggling and fighting with the gun more than you are with the target sometimes. You might find yourself struggling to keep a good tight grouping on a target that's only like 7 or 10 yards away, making it very difficult for you to justify using it in self-defense in the first place. You might find that the parts wear down quickly, that they're metal-injected molding and not really machined steel, so they wear, they flex, they break, they're brittle, and you might even find a lot of guns that just straight up don't work out of the box. I know I had one buddy who bought a Taurus, and brand new out of the box, not only was the gun not working, but you literally couldn't even chamber the round because the machine that drilled the hole where it allowed you to put the round to slip into battery, it hadn't even been milled out all the way. The gun came out of the box not able to go into battery, right? So we're talking a brand new gun that didn't even get QA'd. Like, nobody even looked at the gun and went like, this is obviously not put together. The gun's like stuck in like this position. You know what I mean? Like half cocked back and not able to slide forward. So like, you know, you get what you pay for, right? So understanding what you're paying for and the hidden costs associated with gun ownership is a big deal, right? If you're going out and buying a brand new Glock and you're getting a cute little 43X MOS and you let the gun store guy talk you into it. Let's set the scenario. Actually, this is a fun exercise. I am little Susie Rotten Crotch, and I need to go buy a 9mm handgun to defend my 3 little hobgoblin children while my man's away. When's he coming back? I don't know. Stepped out for cigarettes a couple months ago. Surely he's coming back. Anyways, the neighbors are meth addicts, and twice now I've caught them trying to come into the home looking for my copper, and I need that copper because it's the only thing that helps my oven work in the winter, which is how I keep my kids cool, like not frozen to death. Anyways, I'm like this close to falling off the edge. I'm living paycheck to paycheck because I work at a diner. I work at the Shoney's slinging syrup, and I don't have a ton of money to go out and spend on Gucci guns. I'm not trying to be John Wick, right? I'm just trying to keep, Joe, Beth, and Jamie Rotten Crotch safe in my little Rotten Crotch household. So I go out and I go to the pawn shop and I'm looking for used Glocks because some smart, well-educated, articulate gun person told me that most guns actually do have a break-in period. And like most mechanical objects, it takes a while for the tension springs on the handgun to really kind of get that worn-in feeling so it's cycling properly. And the tolerances for nicer guns, sometimes they get a little bit better the more you use them. They get a little bit looser. Like not too loose where they're not working or cycling properly, but well within the manufacturer's tolerances. For instance, my brand new Staccato XC, when I first bought it, it was still the smoothest, best shooting, most accurate pistol I've ever had, but 1 in every 8 rounds I was having issues with failure to eject, double feeding, all sorts of shit. And at first I thought it was me and my grip and whatever, but no. The gun just needed to be broken in, and it needed a lot of oil, like a Diddy party of oil, like, just pouring it down. Just every time I shot it was blowing out of the port, tons of oil. And now it runs like a dream. I don't have any sort of issues with my Staccato. It doesn't have a single problem, especially since I moved to 124 grain ammunition, yada yada yada. But it took 600 rounds of ammunition to get there. 600, right? That's 12 boxes of $30 ammunition, right? So if you're going out there and you're like, I just need the gun to work really, really well when I need it to run very, very well. I just need it for that one moment when things might go terrible, and I want it to run perfectly whenever there's that problem. Sometimes it makes more sense to go out and buy a used gun because it's been running in that situation, and if there's any issues, you'll catch it, like right there, right? You don't have to worry about like how the tolerances are going to change over a length of time. Does that make sense? So, I'm Mrs. Rotten Crotch, right? And I go into the pawn shop and I'm talking to the Slimeball Salesman 1, right? And Slimeball Salesman 1 says, well, what you need is a Glock, a little 43X. Now, that's where I'd agree with him. That's a used little Glock 43X. You probably pick that up $300-$400. You're out. You can use that extra $100 to pick up 2 boxes of banger hollow point ammunitions. You probably get 2 magazines, right? Keep both of those loaded by the bedstand and you're good. You've done it. You've accomplished the task. But this salesman goes, well, Mrs. Rotten Crotch, you're a little bit older, right? And I know this is a 3 1/4 inch barrel, but what we can do, see, is we can get you this Glock 43X MOS with an optics cut. Now, it's only $60 more, but what this allows you to do is, see these holes up here on the top of your pistol? We can drill on we can put a little doodad on there so you can sit an optic on it, and then you can put on one of these cheap these little doodads right up here, right on top of the pistol, right? So this way you don't got to aim. You don't got to worry about the little U-bucket and getting good with the sights. And, if you're trying to shoot a target further out, it might be difficult for you to acquire that sight picture. So what we can do is you sell you this one, right? Just $30 more. And look, if you ever need to resell it, someone looking to buy it's going to go, hey, that one's got it. It's got the attachments on it that I can get. So in their mind, the value is going to go up on it, right? This guy's more interested in moving the sale, trying to bump you, than he is about examining your use case. if you're shooting from 7 yards, the red dot's not going to make a change at all, right? Especially if you're working with like a 3 1/4 inch barrel striker fired gun. The only reason why you put that on there is because you want it, right? It makes you feel cool. It looks good. It's really not necessary, especially if you're working with the budget, right? But let's say you go out and she's like, oh, sweet Jesus, God knows I don't want to put in effort. That would be scary. Guns are scary. So if I just buy a scarier looking gun, surely it means I'm going to be a better shot. Go ahead and sign me up for that little 43X MOS with the red dot cut, sweetheart. I think that's a lovely purchase. Thank you so much. And then you go out and you get the Glock, right? And you go, oh, okay, so I guess it was a little bit more expensive, and after tax, I can't really afford the ammo on it, but it does come with the 2 magazines, so, alright, well, I guess since I spent all this money trying to get the optic cut, maybe I should go out and try and look at this optic, right? So, my 3 little rotten crotch kids, instead of eating hamburger helper with the actual hamburger, now they're just having helper for a month because mommy needs to save $500 to get, the optic, right? So, kids go a couple months without solid food, whatever, fuck them. Now you got your optic, right? So you get the optic, you order it. Now this bad boy is $3.99 before tax, right? So you go get the optic and you put it, you go and you get it, you put it on top of that Glock, and you go, now wait a minute, this don't fit. How come this don't fit? So you go back to the pawn shop guy and you're like, hey, so I bought the optic and I bought the pistol. And the optic, it doesn't play with the pistol. It's not like a Lego. It don't just snap on. Do I super glue it? And they go, well, see, what you need is you need a plate. You need an adapter plate to make this play with the gun, because see, not every optic's meant to go directly mounted onto the gun. So what you need to do is go out and buy an $86 plate, and what that plate will do, it's kind of like a connector Lego that's going to allow this Lego to attach to that Lego. But you don't want to get a cheap piece, because if you get a cheap piece, well, then the optic's going to wiggle and slide, and you've actually reduced the accuracy and the measure of accuracy that you'd be getting on this here optic. So what I do is I'd recommend the Glock proprietary part that flush mounts to this optic, and and so, well, that's only $80, and you got to pay a machinist to work on it for 2 weeks. And so once that cuts off the CNC machine, they'll send it over to you, and then you'll be right as rain. Okay, so you scrape up another $100, right, to go take your $400 optic. So now you got your $100 optic plate, your $400 optic. The optic plate finally comes in. It's been a month and a half. You put the optic plate on the gun. You screw on the optic plate to the zeroing mount. But now, right, you go to the range. You're like, oh, perfect. I got my beautiful little red dot. Now I just got to put it on the target, squeeze the trigger. You put it on the target, you squeeze the trigger, and it's nowhere near the red dot. It's firing off. Like, you're not even hitting the paper. You go, but I don't understand. I thought this was supposed to make my gun more accurate. Well, it's not zeroed. It's not zeroed to the pistol. So now you got to go out. You either got to buy a $15 little laser bore sight angle adjuster, or you got to go spend some more money on ammo, and you got to go shoot the target, and you got to play the Kentucky windage game to move the red dot onto the actual target. And that might take you a box of ammo or 2, depending on your skill level. That's going to take you some time out at the local range or at the firing range, and that's going to take moments out of your day to go get this done, just because you weren't happy with a factory sight that came with your firearm. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have dots. I love dots. I have a dot on my pistol, and with this guy I can shoot out to 100 yards, and I'm happy with the performance on this. But I also know that, like, this is a $5,000 pistol with a $400 optic on it. It's not a $400 pistol with a $400 optic and a $100 optics plate. You know, understanding what you're trying to elevate for the task it's trying to do is really important, because at the end of the day, when you finally do get your locked cock, ready to rock, badass Glock with your with your RMR on it, and by the way, this is one of the cheaper RMRs. This is one of the cheapest RMR footprints you can get, and it's $400. A Trigicon's like $600-$700, right? Sometimes it's more than the guns that you're putting it on. So understanding why you need the tool, and not just because it's cool, not just because it like makes you feel like a tactical operator, right? If there's a skill set you're trying to improve on, with that tool, go for it. But you should be very, very cautious when someone's trying to bump you on something that you might not necessarily need for that firearm. And I think like optics can be one of those things depending on the pistol, right? Like there's benefits to having an optic. You can keep both eyes open, meaning with my left eye, I can look at you, and with my right eye, I got the dot on your forehead. So my right eye is making sure that if you do anything crazy, I can squeeze the trigger and you go down. But my left eye is actually looking you up and down. Do you have a pistol on your waistband? Are you reaching for something? It allows me to be more situationally aware so that I don't make an in-the-moment error, which might cost somebody something precious to them, right? Which is ultimately what we're trying to do. Be aware of what's going around us when we're in our situation. And the last thing you want when you have a gun, you're staring at somebody, you're not like aware of what's around you, etc., etc., etc. So, the hidden costs of gun ownership is essentially what I'm trying to harp on. I know it's taking a while to get to that point, but if you are sympathetic towards the rotten crotch family and you want their kids to grow up with any level of protein and no vitamin deficiencies, well, understanding that everybody has a different budget and everybody has a different task and purpose for their firearm, you know, that's really important, right? That's really important to understand what someone's trying to get out of that purchase. So anyways, this has been another very, very long formatted video. I didn't even get to talk about student number 2 just because I got so caught up in Jacob and a bunch of personal anecdotes, which I hope you get used to because I apparently cannot make short format videos to save my life. I enjoy the longer format stuff. I've always enjoyed longer formats. And hopefully my growing audience does too. Anyways, I hope you found something informative here. If not, please ask me questions on something that you think you are interested in learning about, and I will do my very best and utmost to teach about it. I'll make another video soon going over student 2 and what we learned at the range and different lessons learned, etc., etc., etc. As always, thank you for watching, and if you're interested in learning more about firearms or guns or gun safety or whatever, please hit me up. I love teaching. I love answering questions. Thanks, and hope I see you later.